No male lead, female lead only beautiful. Xue Jiaojiao returned to the year when she entered Dongsheng Shenzhou at the age of 13. Due to her identity, she was once excluded by the people of Dongsheng Shenzhou and became a fairy killer, being personally killed by those she liked. In this life, Xue Jiaojiao escaped from Dongsheng Shenzhou overnight and ran to Yunmengze. This is a sect completely different from Dongsheng Shenzhou, and the cultivators here will not discriminate against Xue Jiaojiao's identity. There is a senior sister in Yunmengze who is obsessed with cultivation and knows nothing about culture. A straightforward second senior brother. Entering the Tao through physical cultivation and breaking the doubts of the genius third senior sister. The happy and responsible Gemini of the sect. The sixth senior brother with a weak personality but extremely high combat effectiveness. 7 senior brothers who love all the golden items. There are also many senior brothers and sisters who have given Xue Jiaojiao completely different feelings. Xue Jiaojiao has found her own path in Yunmengze and is constantly striving for it. She doesn't want to be a fairy killer anymore in this life. She also wants to cultivate well like an ordinary person, and one day she can set foot on the path of immortality. Xue Jiaojiao, who accidentally became the darling of the Yunmengze group, became a hot cake. Senior brothers and sisters spoke one after another. Jiaojiao, feel free to practice with peace of mind. Who dares to come and talk nonsense in front of you? Senior brothers and sisters will take care of them for you. P.S. The eldest daughter majored in immortal literature. Without a male lead and not in the harem, Pei Nanjun can be considered an important male supporting figure. Regret is the norm in the human world. If you like Baozi with CP, please take a detour. Keywords of the novel. After Rebirth, become a group favorite junior sister in the cultivation world without pop-ups. After Rebirth, become a group favorite junior sister in the cultivation world. Download the complete set of TXT. After Rebirth, become a group favorite junior sister in the cultivation world. Read the latest chapter. Chapter 1. 13 years old. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. 13 years old. My father is a fairy slayer, and my grandfather is also a fairy slayer. What can I do if I am not a fairy slayer? The weather has cleared up for a long time, and on this bright spring day, the flowers in the mountains and fields are blooming freely. Hoo hoo hoo, Xue Jiaojiao pressed on her chest, as if the air in her lungs was about to be squeezed out. She slightly opened her eyes and looked around, the familiar main hall building making her unable to help but feel lost in thought. Isn't she already taken to the demon suppression stage? The feeling of the spirit sword piercing through the Dantian was particularly strong, but when she placed her hand on the Dantian, she suddenly froze. Dantian is intact but lacks any spiritual power, like someone who has not yet formally practiced. She finally realizes something is wrong, with the slightly youthful faces in the main hall and the angry elders with round eyes. The scene at this moment is very similar to when she first entered Dongsheng Shenzhou at the age of 13. The pressure made her head droop again, and the feeling of squeezing her chest became even more intense. "All right," said Luo Yiming, the leader of Dongsheng Shenzhou, raising his hand to stop the angry elder. "Master. Do you know what you are doing? She is a descendant of the immortal killer, and you don't understand the probability of her becoming an immortal killer. Blood is something that cannot be extinguished." The other elders also agreed. Yes, she shamelessly got into the Dongsheng Shenzhou. If we don't kill her today, how many lives will we lose in the cultivation world the next day? Luo Yiming pressed her temples and looked at Xue Jiaojiao, who was kneeling on the ground sweating profusely. After all, her mother is immortal, and she has never had contact with that immortal killer. That doesn't prove anything. Blood is hidden in the bones. If we don't get rid of her today, we won't have time to regret it later. Xue Jiaojiao knelt on the ground listening to the argument that was exactly the same as in her memory, with blood seeping out of her ears. If you remember well, Pei Nanjun will soon come to pass the message on behalf of his master. The reason why she angered the elders was because her father was a fairy killer. As the name suggests, this was an even more detestable existence than a demon cultivator, specializing in killing righteous people. Due to the practice of the law, the immortal slayer will inherit the curse of internal violence to their descendants, and as a result, most of the descendants of the immortal slayer will inherit the position of their previous generation. Xue Jiaojiao closed her eyes and recalled how she had taken the path of a fairy killer step by step, becoming notorious for her wrongdoing. In the end, Pei Nanjun personally beheaded her. She didn't expect to return to the age of 13. Looking at those hateful faces, Xue Jiaojiao just wanted to get away from here as soon as possible. The door was opened again, just as Xue Jiaojiao had thought. Pei Nanjun came. At this time, he was still young and had a well-preserved appearance, but Xue Jiaojiao, like other female disciples of Dongsheng Shenzhou, secretly admired him. "Master, please wait a moment, elders." Pei Nanjun arched his hand and stood beside Xue Jiaojiao. "I will deliver a message on behalf of my master. Although this woman has half of the bloodline of a fairy killer, she has never seen her father before and has not committed any evil deeds due to her bloodline for 13 years. I will stay in Dongsheng Shenzhou as a disciple to sweep and observe, and if there are any abnormalities, my master will take responsibility." Xue Jiaojiao glanced at him sideways, and the image of him numbly piercing her Dantian with a spirit sword came to her mind. The main hall suddenly fell silent, and Pei Nanjun's master, who was the only disciple of a saint in the world today, naturally spoke with enough weight. After Pei Nanjun finished speaking, he left. Luo Yiming propped up her head with one hand and said, "Then let Yunlan be a disciple of the sweeper. Xue Jiaojiao doesn't want to continue staying here as a sweeping disciple. Everyone can bully her." On the surface, she respectfully agreed and secretly prepared to leave tonight. As she left the main hall, she heard someone say, "Her mother truly deserves to be a Qinghe Kabuki. She has many benefactors, all of whom have come to Dongsheng Shenzhou." Xue Jiaojiao clenched her fist. "Dead old man, let's wait and see." Xue Jiaojiao went to collect the waist tag of the sweeping disciple and tidied up the softness she had brought. In fact, there was not much, only a crumpled bundle. She was assigned to live in the most remote place, and the memories left by Dongsheng Shenzhou for her were not truly beautiful. In addition, many new disciples were not taken care of by her, and she was fortunate enough not to leave the house. When she was hungry, she would take the cake from her bag and eat it. Xue Jiaojiao waited until late at night like this. The disciples guarding the mountain walked round after round, and Xue Jiaojiao was very precise in controlling the timing of their shift changes. After breaking the disciples' waist token, she headed straight to the mountain gate. As she approached the mountain gate, Xue Jiaojiao's eyes lit up and she ran out with all her might. Just as she stepped out, she saw a person standing in front of her, and Xue Jiaojiao stopped in her tracks. Under the bright moonlight, Pei Nanjun stood there, looking back at her. Xue Jiaojiao muttered to herself that she was really unlucky tonight. She could run away and even run into Pei Nanjun. "Are you going down the mountain?" Pei Nanjun, who had spoken less than 10 words to Xue Jiaojiao in the previous life, suddenly spoke up, startling her greatly. Xue Jiaojiao tightened her burden on her back and said, "Since senior brother knows, please make way for me. After all, my identity is not suitable to stay in Dongsheng Shenzhou. Can the disciple's waist token be crushed?" Xue Jiaojiao raised her eyebrows. The waist tag of Dongsheng Shenzhou's disciple has a tracking function. Of course, she broke it up just now, but Pei Nanjun asked why. "Go to Yunmengze, where the requirements for a cultivator's identity are very relaxed, perhaps it will be more suitable for you." Xue Jiaojiao suddenly couldn't understand the person in front of her. She had liked him before, but in the end, when the spirit sword pierced into the elixir field, all her likes turned into nothing. Because she felt that Pei Nanjun, like those people, also believed that she was a born villain. She stopped thinking and brushed past him. "Xue Jiaojiao." Pei Nanjun suddenly called her name. "Become an immortal, you will definitely have a smooth path to immortality in the future. Xue Jiaojiao turned her back to him, pursed her lips, and exerted great force on her palms. Senior brother Pei, you are too meddlesome. After speaking, Xue Jiaojiao walked away without looking back. I never told you my surname is Pei. The moonlight fell, and Pei Nanjun watched her departing figure, as if it had penetrated a long river of time. Although Xue Jiaojiao scoffed at Pei Nanjun's teachings on the surface, she had to admit that he was right. Yunmeng's tolerance is indeed the greatest among all sects, but she herself is not sure if she will accept the offspring of this immortal killer. Xue Jiaojiao had always wanted to become an immortal in her heart. She didn't want to be any immortal killer and lived like a monster. We have to give it a try. Xue Jiaojiao looked at the road ahead. We can't waste this opportunity to start over again. She left Dongsheng Shenzhou and went to Yunmengze with the only silver left on her body. Not to mention the hardships along the way, her mortal body almost starved to death halfway. When we arrived at Yunmengze, we were all disheveled and couldn't see our original appearance. So much so that when she arrived in front of them, the boatman even stared and confirmed several times that this person was indeed coming to pay respects. Without CP, Pei Nanxuan, Xun, is an important supporting role and does not reveal the secret. Jiaojiao Dumei Shixian Wen Baozi, who likes coquettishness, can add a collection in bookshelf, and vote more often. Can you give me a few more small stars to rate if there are any typos? The treasures need to point them out to me. I may have missed them when checking. Climbing the list during the new book period requires everyone's assistance. I will also work hard to update. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Yunmengze. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Yunmengze. Yunmengze is completely different from Dongsheng Shenzhou. It is surrounded by water on three sides. Xue Jiaojiao sits on a small boat, and the boatman rows to the other side. Yunmeng's disciples are all there. The emerald green lotus leaves on the lake swayed gently with the gentle breeze, and the new shoots of willow trees stirred ripples. Occasionally, a few waterfowl skimmed over the water surface. Compared to those magnificent buildings and jade houses, Xue Jiaojiao still prefers the scenery in front of her. The ship quickly docked, and Xue Jiaojiao stood there. The plaque of Yunmengze was slightly crooked, looking very old and completely different from a sect. Who are you? Suddenly, a voice emerged from behind, and Xue Jiaojiao was startled, almost making a sound. A male cultivator walked up to her, dressed in golden clothes, and saw Xue Jiaojiao's eyes flickering. The male cultivator clenched his right hand into a fist and hammered it in the palm of his left hand. Oh, I see. Are you here to pay respects to your master? Yes. Xue Jiaojiao took a long time to regain her voice. Why did you come so late? But it's okay, I'll take you inside. Xue Jiaojiao followed the people in a daze and was taken all the way to the main hall. There don't seem to be many disciples of Yunmengze, and Xue Jiaojiao hasn't encountered many in the past. My name is Jinziki. In recent years, there have been fewer and fewer new disciples in Yunmengze. I was about to go outside to find someone, but I didn't expect to meet you. It's really fate. As Jinziki walked, she chattered incessantly, but Xue Jiaojiao couldn't get in touch. After he had almost finished introducing Yunmengze, the people also arrived at the main hall. Master, Jinziki shouted inside. What are you doing? Tao Yenji revealed a pair of eyes through the crack in the door and saw a dusty little girl standing next to Jinziki. He pulled the door open with both hands. Master, this girl is here to pay her respects. Tao Yenji immediately put on a smile and said, Master, good master, come on in. This extremely toothy smile made Xue Jiaojiao tremble, and she exclaimed in her heart that she seemed to have come to an incredible place. Tao Yenji smiled and took out a stone to test his spiritual roots, stuffing it into Xue Jiaojiao's palm. The stone emitted a faint light, and Xue Jiaojiao glanced at it and handed it to Tao Yenji. The water and wood double spiritual roots are of decent quality, and with a little carving, they are a good seedling. Double spiritual roots, a talent that is above average. Xue Jiaojiao thought to herself that it is indeed the same as in the previous life. Master. Tao Yanji looked up at her. Xue Jiaojiao hesitated and said, I have half the bloodline of a fairy killer. My father is a fairy killer, and my mother is an ordinary person. She still decided to be honest. After all, when selecting disciples in the sect, they will investigate their identities thoroughly. Tao Yanji fell silent, and Jin Ziki beside him widened his eyes. He didn't expect that the person he casually pulled in would have a connection with the immortal killer. Xue Jiaojiao's heart was full of ups and downs, and Yunmengze couldn't accept her either. Is it really not suitable for her to take the path of cultivating immortals? Is it true that descendants of immortal killers can only become immortal killers? I'll have to discuss this with a few elders before making a decision. You can stay in the sect first, Ziki. Take her to the guest room. Yes. Jin Ziki waved at her and said, come with me. Leaving the main hall, Xue Jiaojiao sighed, realizing that her identity was really a big problem. Jin Ziki, who was walking ahead, was no longer as talkative as before, which made Xue Jiaojiao's heart even more uncertain. Don't worry, the leader and senior uncles are still very reasonable, Jin Ziki suddenly spoke out to comfort her. When they find out that you have not committed any evil deeds due to your bloodline, it is still very likely that you will be admitted to Yunmengze. Jin Ziki slowly turned around and said, Yunmengze is a great place. The elder who manages the book pavilion now is similar to you, so just relax. Jin Ziki's comfort was obviously very effective, and Xue Jiaojiao's nervousness dissipated quite a bit. In just a short while, Tao Yanji had someone investigate all the things that had happened to Xue Jiaojiao in the past 13 years, and then summoned the elders to discuss this matter. Unlike the aggressiveness of Dongsheng Shenzhou, Yunmeng's discussion appeared much more peaceful. Xue Jiaojiao received the news at night, and Jinziki asked her to go to the main hall. When she arrived, there were many people inside, which made her scalp tingle. Tao Yanji looked at her kindly and said, we already know about you. After discussing with the elders, we have decided to admit you to our family. After all, you have not been injured by violent bloodline injuries, and you are also a child with a poor background. Xue Jiaojiao unexpectedly looked at the others with similar expressions. Thank you very much, Master and all the elders. Xue Jiaojiao knelt down and kowtowed. From Nan, take her to rearrange the disciples' residence, and she will become your junior sister from now on. Xie Tsongnan walked out, arched his hand, and lowered his gaze to look at Xue Jiaojiao kneeling on the ground. Congratulations on becoming a part of us. Thank you, senior sister. Xue Jiaojiao stood up from the ground and followed Xie Tsongnan out. Xie Tsongnan walked side by side with her and whispered, although the leader and elder agreed to let you in, your identity cannot be concealed. The sect leader and his family are aware of the truth that disaster is not as great as family, but the disciples in the sect who have lost their parents due to the immortal killer may be more extreme. You should be more cautious. These kind reminders made Xue Jiaojiao couldn't help but feel a slight warmth in her heart. I will pay attention and prove that I am not affected by the bloodline of the immortal killer. If they go too far, you can tell me. I am the senior sister of Yunmengze, and I can make decisions for you. Okay. Xie Tsongnan took her to the disciples' residence, which was a prepared room with the disciples' clothing on the bed. Don't wake up late tomorrow morning. There are many things you need to learn in the future, don't be afraid of hardship or fatigue. When Xie Tsongnan left, he reminded him again. Xue Jiaojiao reached out to touch the mattress, which was soft and gentle. She had never seen such a soft mattress before in Dongsheng Shenzhou for so many years. Although the furnishings here are simple, they are very in line with Xue Jiaojiao's wishes. Yunmengze is really good. Xue Jiaojiao murmured softly, reached out and pushed open the window, and moonlight fell in. Tao Yanji in the main hall pinched a few pages of paper and lightly clicked. The list above is exactly the life story of Xue Jiaojiao, signed by Pei Nanjun from Dongsheng Shenzhou. Tao Yanji twisted his beard. If it weren't for Pei Nanjuan's timely delivery, he wouldn't have discussed the outcome so quickly. But why is this? He couldn't guess Pei Nanjuan's thoughts even while holding a few pieces of paper. He had seen that child before, who was extremely talented and cold-hearted, making him the most suitable cultivator for immortality. I'm really old, my brain can't even move anymore. Tao Yenji burned these few pieces of paper on the candlelight. Anyway, in short, Xue Jiaojiao has a good temperament as a child. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Individualized Senior Brothers and Sisters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Individualized Senior Brothers and Sisters. When the first rooster crow sounded in Yunmengze, Xue Jiaojiao opened her eyes and it was time to get up. She quickly washed up and changed into the disciple attire of Yunmengze, with a light blue tone embroidered with fish patterns. On the square, there were a few sparse people, and Xue Jiaojiao saw Xie Tsongnan at a glance. I woke up quite early, Xie Tsongnan walked over. I'll take you to recognize people. Xue Jiaojiao looked around and couldn't help but ask, Senior sister, it seems that there aren't many disciples of Yunmengze. Xie Tsongnan coughed lightly and said, it's okay, it's a bit less than other sections. Without waiting for Xue Jiaojiao to continue speaking, Xie Tsongnan pointed to a male cultivator holding a sword in both hands and said, that's your second senior brother Qi Shao. He's a swordsman with a personality, and his speech is not very likable. Hello, second senior brother. Upon hearing Xie Tsongnan's words, Qi Shao turned his head and looked at Xue Jiaojiao beside Xie Tsongnan. Too weak. If you're targeted by those disciples with extreme personalities, you'll probably have to suffer a lot. Xue Jiaojiao shrank her neck. Of course, she knew this kind of hardship, as she had experienced it quite a bit in Dongsheng Shenzhou. She doesn't even know how to breathe air into her body now, okay? It's hard to say what will happen in the future. Xie Tsongnan rolled his eyes in frustration. That's too weak, and when will you have a fight with me? Qi Shao looked at her. Xie Tsongnan pulled Xue Jiaojiao away and waved his hand, saying, I don't have time to talk to you. Qi Shao rubbed the handle of his sword and continued to meditate against the pillar. Xie Tsongnan. A robust woman with dark skin hooked onto her shoulder, looked down at Xue Jiaojiao, and reached out to pat her back. I'm too thin, I should eat more rice. Xue Jiaojiao was stumbling when she was photographed, and turned to look at the straightforward speaking nun. This is your third senior sister Chu Qingxi. The name Chu Qingxi, once heard by Xue Jiaojiao in her past life, is a remarkable woman who entered the Tao through physical cultivation and shattered everyone's doubts. Chu Qingxi was able to fight back and forth against those arrogant sons known as geniuses. Chu Qingxi smiled and revealed her white teeth, if you're being bullied, come find me. As long as it's not your fault, I can teach them a lesson for you. Thank you, third senior sister. Little junior sister is very polite, completely different from those dirty things, Chu Qingxi whispered in Xie Tsongnan's ear. You should take care of them more on a daily basis. The cultivators in the immortal cultivation world don't dislike the immortal slayer for a day or two, and their actions are indeed disgusting. However, if young disciples don't understand those big principles, they may hurt their junior sister. I know, Chu Qingxi assured as she patted her chest, I'll definitely take care of you. I don't need to introduce it, the 7th-ranked Jinziki. Jinziki looked over with a smile. Xie Tsongnan pointed to the male cultivator squatting on the side and said, that's your 6th senior brother, Chu Ci. Hello, senior brothers. Now in Yunmengze, Xie Tsongnan has already introduced her to all of them, and there are still several who have not returned from their outdoor experiences. Not long after the introduction, the teaching elder arrived and the disciples began to train in an orderly manner. The teaching elder waved to Xue Jiaojiao and said, Xue Jiaojiao, come here. Xue Jiaojiao walked over. You have just entered the practice and haven't yet infused qi into your body. First, go to the Fish Dragon Hall to learn some basic skills. The disciples you just saw are the 12 princes of Yunmengze. I hope you can also join them in the future. The teaching elder patted Xue Jiaojiao's shoulder and took out a book from the square-inch ring to hand to her. Just go straight from here and then turn left to reach the Fish Dragon Hall. I have already said hello to the elders over there, just go and listen. Thank you very much, elder. Good child, go ahead. Watching Xue Jiaojiao leave, the teaching elder also felt a bit worried. Due to the child's identity, I hope not to encounter any big trouble. Elder, have you poured chicken soup for your new disciple again? Xie Tsongnan leaned over. The teaching elder touched his nose and said, everyone has the potential to become the CEO, I'm just giving appropriate encouragement. Xue Jiaojiao followed the path pointed out by the teaching elder and arrived at the Yulong Hall. At this time, the formal class had not yet begun. The lecturer of the Yulong Hall saw Xue Jiaojiao and nodded slightly, letting her in. She held the book and accepted the scrutiny of dozens of people in the hall. She swallowed her saliva slightly, and the people watching her looked different, unsure of what they were thinking. Lecturer Yu Qing knocked on the table and said, what are you looking at? They all have 2 eyes and 1 mouth, and you should look down at your own book. Xue Jiaojiao quickly found a vacant seat next to her and sat down. Just as she opened the book, a female cultivator who was about her age turned her head and said, you. Xue Jiaojiao met her complex gaze, unsure of what to respond to. Yu Qing stood up slowly and said calmly, the immortal killer is certainly extremely despicable, but at your current age, you already have the basic ability to judge right and wrong. The sins committed by those immortal killers cannot be added to a person who has not committed any wrongdoing. If you want to seek justice, then go find the person who truly harms you. Yunmeng's purpose is to not attack innocent colleagues. Do you understand this? Dozens of disciples who were scanned by Yu Qing lowered their heads one after another. I understand. Everyone responded in unison. Xue Jiaojiao felt quite emotional in her heart, and looked up at Yu Qing's gaze. Yu Qing nodded slightly at her. At the official teaching time, Yu Qing asked them to open the book. You are all new disciples of Yunmengze. Today is your first lesson, introducing qi into the body, which is also the most crucial step in cultivation. Learning to introduce qi into the body is the threshold for entering the cultivation of immortals, and you are also considered serious cultivators. Yu Qing explained all the key points to them in great detail. Xue Jiaojiao was already good at it, but she observed the people around her and pretended to be half knowledgeable and half understanding. Now you can try it yourself. Dozens of people began to move one after another, some blushing with suppressed faces, feeling the spiritual energy of Dantian. Xue Jiaojiao remained focused and felt it for a moment. She deliberately made a mistake and never succeeded. It wasn't until several of them succeeded in the Fish Dragon Hall that Xue Jiaojiao finally showed her true strength. She has practiced breathing into her body countless times, and now she is also adept at using it. The slightly warm spiritual energy was spinning in the Dantian, and Xue Jiaojiao only felt light and smooth all over her body, and her whole body was also much clearer. Yu Qing clapped his hands and said, you did a good job. This class is mainly for you to practice. If you don't understand, you can ask me or someone who has already learned. The Fish Dragon Hall suddenly became lively, and the female cultivator who had just spoken to Xue Jiaojiao turned her head. She reached out and tapped Xue Jiaojiao's shoulder. Can you teach me? Xue Jiaojiao glanced at her unexpectedly. My name is Zheng Yuanxue. I have heard everything elder you've said just now, but it's not very important, so I would like to ask for your advice. Please use the ticket to smash me to death, crab. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Luo Yiming. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Luo Yiming. A girl with thin skin feels embarrassed to ask the lecturer for advice, and Xue Jiaojiao understands this. But when someone took the initiative to talk to her, she was still very happy. It's possible. Xue Jiaojiao guided Jing Yuanxue to do it while speaking, and after more than a dozen repetitions, Jing Yuanxue finally learned how to induce qi into her body. Thank you. Jing Yuanxue smiled at her. I didn't mean to look at you with that kind of gaze just now. Xue Jiaojiao looked at Jing Yuanxue unexpectedly. Jing Yuanxue's lips stiffened as she spoke calmly. My mother was killed by the immortal killer, so I don't know how to face you with such an identity. But just now, Elder Yuqing said that you are innocent. I think the elder is right. After all, your death has nothing to do with my mother. Xue Jiaojiao rubbed the corners of her eyes and said, thank you for thinking so. When she was in Dongsheng Shenzhou in her previous life, regardless of whether those disciples had a deep hatred towards the immortal slayer, they would come to make fun of and humiliate her. Jing Yuanxue looked at the reddened ends of her eyes, feeling a myriad of emotions in her heart. She could figure it out, and ultimately, she had never faced the immortal killer directly. Most of the people here were the same as her, but there was one person who was different. That. My name is Xue Jiaojiao. Xue Jiaojiao. Jing Yuanxue called out her name. Among the new disciples who joined Yunmengze this year, there was one person whose parents were killed by the immortal killer. He was present at that time. If it weren't for the timely arrival of Yunmengze's senior brothers and sisters, he might not have been able to come here today. Xue Jiaojiao's heart thumped for a moment. Who is that person? After asking, she felt a burning gaze stick to her body. Luo Yiming. Xue Jiaojiao turned her head slightly and met a pair of sharp eagle eyes, which were filled with the hatred she was familiar with. She remembered Xie Zongnan's advice. You'd better stay away from him, he doesn't seem to have a good temper, Jing Yuanxue said low, then saw Luo Yiming's terrifying gaze. Xue Jiaojiao held her head in her hand. The start of this game may not be good, but it cannot be considered too bad either. After all, she has arrived at Yunmengze, and at least she is not someone who dislikes dogs. However, this Luo Yiming seems to have some reservations about her. By the end of Yuqing's first class, half of the disciples in the Fish Dragon Hall had already learned to bring qi into their bodies. When the crowd dispersed, Xue Jiaojiao stood up holding a book. Jing Yuanxue asked her, are we going together? Okay, she quickly followed over. As soon as she walked out of the Fish Dragon Hall, her gaze followed her closely. Xue Jiaojiao turned her head slightly and saw Luo Yiming standing at the entrance of the hall. It's so dazzling, Jing Yuanxue couldn't help but sigh. It's okay, I've gotten used to it. Jing Yuanxue gave her a puzzled look. Let's go quickly. The new disciple who later left the Fish Dragon Hall recognized Luo Yiming and patted his shoulder. Luo Yiming, what are you standing here for? Luo Yiming waved his hand and frowned. The person followed the direction that Luo Yiming had just been staring at and happened to see the back of Xue Jiaojiao leaving. Lecturer Yuqing just said, she is innocent, don't do anything foolish. Luo Yiming let out a cold snort from his nostrils, what do I do? Does it have anything to do with you? The new disciple who was pricked by his words immediately became a bit angry and said angrily, I advise you not to cause trouble because everyone is from the same sect. Do you need to manage it? Luo Yiming turned his body and left the Fish Dragon Hall, causing a few people behind to jump in anger. What's his bad temper? Alas, let alone Luo Yiming. He is also a pitiful person. The speakers seemed to have thought of something and closed their mouths. Not long after leaving the Fish Dragon Palace, Xue Jiaojiao and Jing Yuanxue met Xie Zongnan, who had just emerged from the martial arts training ground. Little junior sister, how are you doing in learning how to bring qi into your body? Senior sister Xie, I have learned it now. Xie Zongnan patted her shoulder and praised, it's really good. I mastered it in just half an hour. Jing Yuanxue next to me has also learned. Xue Jiaojiao pointed to Jing Yuanxue who remained silent on the side. Xie Zongnan's gaze turned and he saw the two walking side by side. He nodded slightly and said, it seems that the new disciples this year have done a good job. Zheng Yuanshue's pretty face turned slightly red and she felt a bit embarrassed when praised. Alright, I won't delay your next class. Let's go first. Xie Tsongnan waved to them and left. Senior sister Xie looks really easy. Going, Zheng Yuanshue couldn't help but say. Xue Jiaojiao also nodded. Xie Tsongnan and the cultivators she had encountered in her previous life were very different, completely two extremes. They only rested for a while before starting the second class, which covered some basic knowledge. The lecturer on stage was like an old monk reciting sutras, with a flat tone that did not change at all, making people drowsy. Xue Jiaojiao propped up her head and flipped through the history of cultivating immortals. It still recorded those things, starting from the creation of heaven and earth. After flipping through it, she looked around and saw that several people couldn't hold on, their eyelids were constantly fighting. Luo Yiming suddenly turned her head and looked over, which frightened her. The book in her hand almost fell off, and she suddenly lost any drowsiness. Xue Jiaojiao covered her eyes and helplessly thought, this person seems to really hate her. How can we solve it? Luo Yiming kept staring at her until a brain popped into the back of his head. The lecturer on stage noticed his movements at some point and gave him a headache from afar. This new disciple, what is more interesting than my cultivation history? Luo Yiming rubbed the back of his head, feeling like a bulge was bulging. The pain made the corners of his mouth twitch and he didn't respond. The lecturer snorted and continued the lecture. Zheng Yuanshue, who was standing beside her, covered her lips and coughed lightly. Just now, Luo Yiming's expression was fierce but she didn't dare to attack in person, looking a bit funny. The half-hour-long history of cultivating immortality finally came to an end. At the moment when the lecturer left the Fish Dragon Hall, everyone felt liberated. On the first day of officially joining Yunmengze, Xue Jiaojiao lived a fulfilling life, and even made a friend, which can be considered a significant gain. After nightfall, she returned to her room and tried to breathe in before falling asleep. I always feel that the refined spiritual energy is even more pure than what I used to be. Is it because I am very proficient in it again? Xue Jiaojiao murmured softly, suppressing her doubts in her heart. The more refined the spiritual energy is, the more beneficial it is for cultivation. It wasn't until a few weeks of running that Xue Jiaojiao fell asleep. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared near her door. The figure walked closer and closer, leaning against Xue Jiaojiao's door. Suddenly, another hand reached out from the darkness and stopped the person's movements. Chu Qingzi walked out of the darkness, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. End of this chapter. Chapter 5 Human Prejudice. A Big Mountain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Human Prejudice. A big mountain. Without saying a word, Chu Qingzi took Luo Yiming away from his original position and swept him towards the martial arts training ground. Stinky kid, it's not a good habit to venture into the boudoir at night. Luo Yiming was caught in Chu Qingzi's elbow and struggled for a while. After realizing that there was no effect, he gave up. Senior sister Chu. Luo Yiming kicked his leg. Chu Qingzi put him down. What's wrong? Senior sister, did you misunderstand me? Chu Qingzi hugged her arms and looked at him with eyes burning with flames. Luo Yiming clenched his fist, veins bulging from the back of his hand, and his neck twitching with a youthful vigor. I'm just not convinced. Oh. What are you not convinced of? Why? Why do I dream day and night of the death of my parents, tormenting them every day, yet she, the descendant of the immortal killer, can peacefully practice with us? Luo Yiming gasped for breath, his eyes turned red, and tears welled up from his eyes. Chu Qingzi looked at him up and down, slapped him with the back, and took out the short knife hidden behind him. Have you calmed down? For a long time, Luo Yiming covered his face and let out a muffled "hm." Do you know she hasn't harmed anyone? I know. Chu Qingzi waved his short knife in front of him and said, do you know you're still using this midnight to pry into someone's house? Your behavior violates Yunmengze's rules. Master Yuqing should have told you that in Yunmengze, you're not allowed to act against innocent fellow disciples. I know, Luo Yiming lowered his head. Luo Yiming, human prejudice is like a big mountain. Chu Qingzi pointed to the distant mountain peak, you are now that mountain. You want to press hard on Xue Jiaojiao and kill her. Luo Yiming lowered his head and remained silent. Half a month ago, when I saved you, you saw what the immortal killer who killed your parents looked like. Do they have anything to do with Xue Jiaojiao? They have nothing to do with Xue Jiaojiao, so what were you thinking just now? Luo Yiming looked up helplessly and said, Sister Chu, I'm sorry. Chu Qingzi pressed his head and said seriously, you shouldn't say this to me, you should say it to Xue Jiaojiao. Luo Yiming lowered his head, pursed his lips, and picked his fingers. Chu Qingzi raised her eyebrows and looked at him, did I just say those words in vain? I will apologize, Luo Yiming quickly spoke. Chu Qingzi glanced at him and said, if you want to avenge your parents, you should focus on practicing well. Don't think about all these things. If it weren't for me blocking you, you would have caused chaos in Yunmengze tonight. I know I was wrong. Chu Qingzi lifted her leg and lightly kicked him, all right, hurry up and get back to sleep. Luo Yiming nodded and ran away from Chu Qingzi. Chu Qingzi played with the short knife in his hand, and Xie Tsongnan jumped off the nearby tree branch. You educate people one by one, right? Xie Tsongnan leaned on her shoulder and looked at Luo Yiming's back as he trotted all the way. I only wanted to give that child a hand because he was pitiful. When his parents passed away, others were scared and fooled by the immortal killer. He stayed in Yunmengze for 7 or 8 days before recovering. Xie Tsongnan looked into the distance and said, I remember your 2 older brothers participated in this round of hunting at Qinyan Mountain. Chu Qingzi pinched her eyebrows and said helplessly, yes, it's crazy. I hope they can come back alive. Xie Tsongnan patted her shoulder and said, not to mention that, it's too late. Let's go back to sleep. The next day, when Xue Jiaojiao arrived at the Fish Dragon Palace on time, she was suddenly blocked by Luo Yiming, and her eyelids twitched. Zheng Yuanxue saw the tense atmosphere at the door and quickly ran over. Luo Yiming, you. I'm sorry. Luo Yiming shouted very loudly, with a red face and even red eyes. Xue Jiaojiao, who has been reborn for a lifetime, looks at Luo Yiming as if she is looking at a mischievous child. You. Xue Jiaojiao looked at him with some confusion. How did you change your personality after one night? Don't say Xue Jiaojiao was puzzled, Zheng Yuanshue's words were also blocked by this apology just as she was about to speak. The group of people who had originally intended to argue stopped and stared at Luo Yiming with wide eyes. Don't be narcissistic, I apologize to you only for the sake of Sister Chu's face. After Luo Yiming finished speaking, he brushed his sleeves and ran over from Xue Jiaojiao's side, sitting back in his seat. This apology came and went quickly, making Xue Jiaojiao doubt if she had heard it wrong. Oh my goodness, Luo Yiming will still apologize, Zheng Yuanxue covered her mouth. Xue Jiaojiao coughed lightly, it seemed that Senior Sister Chu had talked to him before, and the effect seemed quite impressive. Xue Jiaojiao is already very satisfied with reaching this point, which is not much better than before. Yuqing came over and saw a group of people gathered around the door, knocking on the doorframe. What are you doing standing here? Class is about to begin. A group of new disciples quickly dispersed and ran towards their seats. Xue Jiaojiao, come with me. Yuqing called out to Xue Jiaojiao, who was about to return to her seat. Xue Jiaojiao put down her book and went over, while Yuqing took her outside. Chu Qingzi asked me to tell you, remember to lock the door at night. Yuqing gave her a meaningful glance. Xue Jiaojiao pondered for a moment, then realized the meaning of this sentence and suddenly felt a little creepy. Thank you very much, lecturer. Go inside. Xue Jiaojiao walked and thought all the way, no wonder Luo Yiming came to apologize. It turned out that she touched the door of her room last night and was scolded by senior sister Chu. The first class was still taught by Yuqing, who emphasized the formation and operation methods of spiritual energy. A person raised their hand curiously and asked, "Lecturer, how do we calculate that we have entered the refining phase?" Yuqing put down the book and demonstrated it to them on site for a whole week. "This is a Sunday." Yuqing stopped his hand and said, "If you want to enter the qi refining period, you need to repeat this cycle 100 times until the spiritual energy in your elixir field can be used by you, and then you can enter the qi refining period." Immediately, someone started trying to do it, but Yuqing didn't stop him. Those who cultivate immortals need to practice more. Xue Jiaojiao only ran it last night and watched as everyone around her started moving. She also imitated the movements of others in a dignified manner. Yuqing walked down, guiding them one by one where their movements and breath were not right. Zheng Yuanxue tried several times before finally feeling some tricks and turned her head to look at Xue Jiaojiao. "Xue Jiaojiao, do you know?" Xue Jiaojiao shook her head and said, "I'll try again." Yuqing lowered his gaze beside her and glanced at her, causing Xue Jiaojiao to feel guilty for a moment. She is not hiding herself, she has decades more experience than these people, which is why she has these things, but this is not her original talent. Instead of using past experiences to shape a genius character, it's better to follow the routine and avoid losing fame later on, resulting in unsatisfactory cultivation results and being covered in jokes. When it comes to talent, one must be someone like Pei Nanjun. 4,000 words per day, distributed tomorrow at 12:05 a.m. and 12:10 a.m. Climbing the list in the new book season requires everyone's help. Seeking collection, seeking tickets, seeking rating. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. The first threshold for entering practice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. The first threshold for entering practice, the breath is chaotic. Yuqing nodded at her table. Xue Jiaojiao immediately regained her senses. She had just thought too much in her mind and suddenly lost her mind. She quickly adjusted her breath and slowly ran a small sundae. Just like when learning how to infuse qi into her body, Xue Jiaojiao waited until someone in the hall learned how to do it before starting to move normally. By the time half of the people in the Fish Dragon Palace had learned, Xue Jiaojiao had already finished a week. "I feel that Dantian's spiritual energy is quite full." Zheng Yuanxue opened her eyes in surprise. "Running it is still very useful. I suggest you run it every night before going to bed, which can also ensure that you sleep well at night. You know a lot." Xue Jiaojiao smiled, she naturally knew more. Every night before, she did this. As the class was in full swing, a disciple of Yunmengze suddenly ran anxiously to find Yuqing. Yuqing stood up and looked at the people in the Fish Dragon Hall. "Practice here by yourself, and when it's time, go back to your place of residence separately." After saying these words, Yuqing never came back again. Throughout the morning, no one came to teach them, so Xue Jiaojiao had to go back to her residence first. After running the room for a few weeks, Xue Jiaojiao was a little curious about why Qing would leave. She calculated the current time and found something from her memory. If she remembers well, at this point in time, it should be the end of the Qingyun mountain hunting. But during this siege, only a few dozen monks returned from the 100 monks who had gone, because they received incorrect information and were attacked by the immortal killer. Xue Jiaojiao still remembers that one of Chu Qingxi's older brothers seemed to have died on Qingyun mountain. This is what Chu Qingxi heard from people in Dongsheng Shenzhou after she gained fame. With this in mind, Xue Jiaojiao put this matter aside. It's not something she should inquire about now. It's better to focus on cultivation now. The next morning, before Yuqing could come, Zheng Yuanxue approached first and said with a somewhat low expression, "Have you heard?" Xue Jiaojiao looked at her with confusion. Zheng Yuan lowered her voice and said, "Two chief senior brothers from Yunmengze also went to Qingyun mountain for hunting. I heard that they were seriously injured yesterday and were brought back, so lecturer Yuqing left so urgently." Xue Jiaojiao really didn't know this. When she heard Jing Yuanxue say it, she was a little surprised. Who did you listen to? Yunmengze is about to spread. Xue Jiaojiao remembered that she hadn't come out much since she returned to her room yesterday, no wonder she didn't know. How are those two senior brothers doing now? Xue Jiaojiao asked. Jing Yuanxue shook her head. At this time, Yu Qin was in the rooms of Shen Qinghe and Shen Qingchuan, and Tao Yanji and other chief disciples were also present. A pair of twins lay on the bed, wrapped in layers of bandages, with only one face exposed. Sister Chu, I'm sorry for not being able to protect your older brother. Shen Qinghe looked apologetically at Chu Qingxi. Chu Qingxi waved her hand and said, just take care of yourself, don't worry about them. Tao Yanji stood by and twisted his beard, saying, Qinyan Mountain is the territory of Beiju Luzhou. Surprisingly, the immortal killers have infiltrated it. This time, the compensation they have given to each sect is enough to drink a pot. The hunting places vary every year, and this time it happened to be Qinyan Mountain, but there was such a big mistake. Out of 104 cultivators, only 48 have returned, which is really rare. Xie Tsongnan glanced at the injuries of the two on the bed. Even Shen Qinghe and Shen Qingchuan's cultivation have suffered such severe injuries. Shen Qingchuan struggled and stood in his dark eye sockets, saying, Shen Qinghe and I were able to escape death. The number of immortal killers who came there was even greater than ours, and they occupied favorable terrain, catching us off guard and having no fighting power. Qi Shao rarely stabbed them, but frowned and pondered. Shen Qinghe nodded in agreement and said, this time is also strange. With so many immortal killers sneaking in, not a single one in the North Qilu Island has noticed. Tao Yanji's movements stopped and he pondered, is it possible that traitors have emerged from within Beiju Luzhou? After a pause, Tao Yanji said, this matter is not your responsibility. Just come back alive. After saying these words, Tao Yanji and several elders hurriedly went out. The remaining CEOs looked at each other in confusion. Shen Qinghe lay in bed and let out a moan. Uncle Lin, is this medicine really useful? Why do I feel like it still hurts all over? As soon as he finished speaking, his door was kicked open and he walked in with a wooden basin in the deep forest. What are you saying bad things about me? I am the best alchemist in Yunmengze. My medicine doesn't work, who else's medicine works? Xie Tsongnan pinched his nose and looked at the wooden basin deep in the forest, which was filled with dark medicinal juice. Uncle Lin, what are you smelling like? Xie Tsongnan couldn't help but ask. Lin Luoshan patted the wooden basin proudly and said, this is a miraculous cure. The pot of miracle medicine emitted a wonderful odor and began to gradually spread. The other 5 people couldn't bear it anymore and rushed out the door. Only the pitiful Shen brothers were left lying in bed, like fish on 2 chopping boards. Uncle Lin. Shen Qinghe looked at the pot of medicinal juice with fear. What is that used for? Lin Luoshan reached out to the bandages on their bodies and smiled kindly, of course it's for treating your injuries. Shen Qinghe and Shen Qingchuan shook at the same time. On this day, everyone outside heard the screams of Shen Qinghe and Shen Qingchuan. Lin Luo, who had finished applying medicine to them, carried out the basin with deep satisfaction. Although the medicinal juice in the deep forest has a unique taste, it has to be said that the effect is significant. On the second day, the 2 of them can go down and walk, but the movement range cannot be too large. Shen Qinghe and Shen Qingchuan brothers arrived at the martial arts training ground, and Chu Xi covered his mouth and smiled. The 2 senior brothers looked like ducks raised in a pond. Shen Qinghe let out a sigh, lifted his bandaged hand and was about to pass, while Chu Xi quickly dodged. Compared to the liveliness on this side of the martial arts training ground, the area in front of the Fish Dragon Hall appears somewhat quiet. Today is their first time touching a wooden sword and placing 3 weapon racks. Qin Shu, the lecturer of swordsmanship, showed his twisted arm and waved his hand, everyone pick one. Today, I will teach you some basic swordsmanship. Xue Jiaojiao stepped forward and picked up one of them. Even though it was a wooden sword, its weight was not to be underestimated, and it was heavy in her hand. The wooden sword is so heavy, Zheng Yuanxue murmured roast. Really weak. Luo Yiming happened to pass by and looked at her up and down. Zheng Yuanxue pursed her lips and rolled her eyes at him. No one can't even lift a wooden sword, can they? Qin Shu hugged his hands and looked at the dozens of new disciples with a smile. Some thin and weak people struggled to hold it with both hands, and when Qin Shu said so, their whole face turned red. Seeking collection, seeking tickets, seeking rating. Don't keep new books, check in and comment more on the book circle. Let me see you. Love you all. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Practical Demonstration. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Practical Demonstration. Xue Jiaojiao held the sword handle in both hands. At the age of 13, her body was still somewhat weak. Fortunately, she had not wasted her spiritual energy these days, so she could only slowly mobilize the spiritual energy of Dantian to lift the sword. I know how to use spiritual energy to unload the weight of the wooden sword. You're good at it. Qin Shu suddenly patted Xue Jiaojiao's shoulder, which scared her and made her lose her breath. The wooden sword fell to the ground. Lecturer Qin. Xue Jiaojiao had to squat down and pick up the wooden sword. Qin Shu smiled and looked at the others. You also have more flexible minds. The wooden sword is too heavy, so try to use spiritual energy to share its weight. Don't turn red with your face, as if you used your strength to lift it up. The group of people pointed at by Qin Shu showed awkward expressions and began to try to share the weight of the wooden sword with their spiritual energy. Xue Jiaojiao held a sword in her previous life, and the wooden sword made by Yunmengze had a similar weight as the sword body used by cultivators, which allowed them to adapt in advance. Learning swordsmanship, there's actually no trick, it's just that you have to dare to swing it, not even swing it. How else can you do anything else? Qin Shu picked up a wooden sword next to him and weighed it in his palm. Seeing Qin Shu holding it so easily, they all showed a look of envy. Without further ado, Qin Shu directly demonstrated basic swordsmanship to dozens of them. The movements were very simple, just swinging, chopping, and chopping, but Qin Shu's strength was obviously not small. The ordinary wooden sword made him swing out waves of energy, blowing their hair flying wildly. After demonstrating it once, there were 3 movements that were easy to remember, and Qin Shu started asking them to do them themselves. For the first time trying swordsmanship, many people did not perform the movements properly. Xue Jiaojiao also felt the difference between Yunmengze and Dongsheng Shenzhou. Yunmengze seems to place more emphasis on the aspect of strength, and Qin Shu's demands on them can be described as nitpicking. After seeing it, they endured half an hour of suffering, but Qin Shu was still dissatisfied. Xue Jiaojiao was sweating profusely. She had not yet reached the stage of qi refining, and she was practicing chopping with such a heavy wooden sword. She had long lost her strength, and even her lips looked pale. She used to be too thin and weak, always hungry and full, and now her strength can't keep up. All right, Qin Shu raised his hand and called to stop them. At the moment Qin Shu spoke, everyone sat down on the ground, and the wooden sword fell from their hands with a thud. Xue Jiaojiao couldn't care about her appearance anymore. She leaned against Zheng Yuanxue, and both of them could clearly hear each other's heavy breathing. This should be one of the least desirable classes for me. Zheng Yuanxue wiped the sweat off her forehead with her sleeve. Long hair stuck to the neck, becoming strands. I'm really a bit tired. Xue Jiaojiao pressed her heart and slightly calmed her pounding heart. Qin Shu rubbed his chin and hissed, did I describe it incorrectly or did I demonstrate it incorrectly? Why is it just that the movements are not in place? The male disciple lying on the ground quickly apologized, Teacher Qin, you taught very well. It's because our skills are inferior to ours. Qin Shu lowered his eyes and pondered for a moment, then suddenly caressed his palm and said, "All right, I'll call your senior brother to give you a practical demonstration, which will be more intuitive." Everyone became interested as soon as they heard it. As long as it wasn't for them practicing, anything would be fine. Several CEOs who received the news began to decline, and Shen Qinghe and Shen Qingchuan began to shout and limped back to their room. Jinzi Qi ran away as soon as he saw Qin Shu showing off. In the blink of an eye, there were only Chu Ci and Qi Xiao on the martial arts training ground. Chu Ci blinked in confusion and suddenly looked at Qi Xiao, senior brother Qi. Qi Xiao looked up at him. "You go give Qin Shu a demonstration, and I'll use a sparring as collateral." Qi Xiao took out his own small notebook and added a stroke of Zheng after the name of Chu Ci, with a densely packed row of names and Zheng characters. "You owe me 9 duels now. I promise I won't forget." After saying Chu Ci, he ran away. Qin Shu turned his head and saw Qi Xiao standing alone, smiling and waving at him. Come on, you senior brother, go and give them a sample." Qi Xiao nodded and followed behind Qin Shu. The new disciples showed curious expressions when they saw Qi Xiao. "This is your senior brother Qi Xiao, who is also one of the 12 chief officials. Now let's go to the misty forest in the back mountain, where your senior brother Qi will demonstrate to you." Xue Jiaojiao was momentarily stunned when she heard the name Misty Forest. It didn't sound like a good place. Did they actually go there to demonstrate? With doubts in mind, Xue Jiaojiao followed them to the misty forest behind Yunmengze mountain. Several layers of barriers have been set up here to prevent things from escaping from the misty forest. Qin Shu opened the barrier and led them inside. As soon as they entered, the temperature dropped and they only stayed here on the outskirts. Surrounded by mist, Qin Shu took out a few live fish from the square-inch ring and threw them with a snap to the ground not far away. The live fish struggled on the ground with their bellies sticking out, and this faint movement immediately attracted the gaze of something in the misty forest. The few fish on the ground are carp. Xue Jiaojiao probably guessed that Qin Shu wanted to lure something out. "What is this about?" Zheng Yuanxue tugged at Xue Jiaojiao's sleeve with some unease. The things in the misty forest didn't make them wait too long, but revealed the true face of Mount Lu. Several large figures slowly approached under the cover of the mist, and Qin Shu lifted his hand to dispel the mist. The carp-eating beast, covered in gray and muscular knots, appeared before their eyes. This is the lowest level monster in the cultivation world, with great strength and a liking for carp. But Xue Jiaojiao knows that carp-eating beasts have another favorite, which is women. Seeing women, carp-eating beasts become more excited than usual. The few carp-eating beasts that ran out grabbed the carp on the ground, chewed them crunchily, and slowly tilted their heads towards the female disciples behind Qin Shu. Qi Xiao walked over, not holding his own sword, but a wooden sword like theirs. He used the basic swordsmanship taught by Qin Shu to his new disciple, and with just a few archery steps, he rushed forward, swinging and chopping 3 movements in a coherent and natural manner, and chopped off the head of a carp-eating beast. The new disciple who watched instinctively held his breath, and the blade of the wooden sword was stained with a crimson hue. It seems that he felt like he was just acting too fast, and this time Qi Xiao slowed down his pace. "Take a closer look at how your senior brother behaves in actual combat," Qin Shu reminded them to come to their senses. Qi Xiao slowed down and gave them a slow motion, still using the same swordsmanship. Zheng Yuanxue was dumbfounded at the sight, and the wooden sword in Qi Xiao's hand seemed to have a divine sense, appearing particularly obedient. Xue Jiaojiao. "It's quite interesting," Xue Jiaojiao watched intently. "Oh my god, you're crazy," Zheng Yuanxue whispered. A female disciple next to her suddenly said, "Why do I suddenly feel that senior brother Qi is a bit handsome?" Zheng Yuanxue choked and said, "It's over, you're also crazy." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Classroom Interlude. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Classroom Interlude. It wasn't until he chopped off the heads of more than 10 carp-eating beasts that Qi Xiao stopped, and the wooden sword in his hand had already been dyed red. The carp-eating beast behind the misty forest trembled and hugged its arm, looking at Qi Xiao's back with frightened eyes. "Do you understand everything?" Qin Shu turned around and asked them. Qi Xiao demonstrated it more than 10 times, both fast and slow. Even someone who is completely ignorant of swordsmanship should have understood how to wield a sword. So they all nodded repeatedly. Qi Xiao breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Finally it was over. Qin Shu led them out of the misty forest, and this class was officially over. "Next time, I hope to see your outstanding performance." Qin Shu left this sentence before leaving. Yunmeng's teaching style is really different, Xue Jiaojiao couldn't help but sigh. Zheng Yuanxue looked at her in surprise and said, "Have you ever seen the teaching methods of other sections?" Xue Jiaojiao felt guilty and quickly made up for it, saying, just casually sighing because senior brother Qi gave me such a shocking feeling. Zheng Yuanxue nodded and said, "That's right, senior brother Qi is truly worthy of being the 12th chief. He can use any ordinary swordsmanship to make a difference." Xue Jiaojiao remembered the time when Xie Tsongnan introduced Qi Xiao to her. She looked at someone with a cold face, but her strength was really strong. After witnessing it firsthand, her understanding of Qi Xiao rose to a higher level. The following class is the cultivation history that they are least willing to attend, and today we are talking about the immortal demon battle 500 years ago. The lecturers have become much more serious, telling the disciples below in detail about what happened back then. The battle between immortals and demons is only over 500 years away from today, and there are still cultivators who have survived that battle. For example, the only sage today, Chu Changsheng, possesses the body of an immortal saint, and the only disciple under his seat is Yun Lan, the person who taught Pei Nanjun to Dongsheng Shenzhou. Because of the existence of Chu Changsheng, they were able to perfect this history. The lecturer talked about Chu Changsheng's deeds and his achievements in the battle between immortals and demons. Xue Jiaojiao has heard these things countless times in Dongsheng Shenzhou, and even in Dongsheng Shenzhou, there is a written test specifically for matters related to Chu Changsheng. Xue Jiaojiao didn't want to listen to the content that could be recited fluently, but fortunately she was stunned. Before she could calm down for long, Luo Yiming suddenly raised his hand and stood up. "Lecturer, Xue Jiaojiao is wandering in your class." Xue Jiaojiao, who was named by her given name, immediately regained her senses, but she was unable to escape under the lecturer's nose. Luo Yiming stood with a serious expression on his face, and Xue Jiaojiao was speechless. She really didn't have a good impression of the child who almost touched her room in the middle of the night. "Xue Jiaojiao, stand up." The lecturer knocked on the table in front of him, flipping through the books in his hand with a clatter. Xue Jiaojiao had no choice but to stand up and give a comforting smile to Zheng Yuanxue, whose eyes were showing concern. "I dare to wander. It seems that I have understood everything I said. Xue Jiaojiao, let me ask you, what is the turning point of the immortal demon war?" Lin Daofeng led his disciples from Xinyo Hezhou and Nangshubuzu to the Nine Immortals Mountain in North Vietnam, forming an encirclement with Dongsheng Shenzhou, Beijiu Luzhou, Fenglingdu, Kunlun Mountain, Penglai Xianshan, and Yunmengze, reversing the battle between immortals and demons. After Lin Daofeng's death, he was posthumously honored as Guangshan Xianjun. Xue Jiaojiao answered obediently without any stage fright. The lecturer let out a soft snort and waved his hand, saying, "All right, listen carefully next time." Xue Jiaojiao curled her lips and said with a smile, "Lecturer, Luo Yiming just said I was distracted, and it's impossible to say that he's the one who didn't listen attentively." The lecturer's sharp gaze fell on Luo Yiming again. Luo Yiming. Luo Yiming stood straight immediately. "What are the 3 great things that the only sage, Lord Chu Changsheng, did in the immortal demon war today?" Luo Yiming swallowed his throat for a moment, then glanced at Xue Jiaojiao. Xue Jiaojiao had already sat down calmly and saw Luo Yiming sneaking a glance. showing a face that was infuriating and not worth her life. "Answer me." The lecturer knocked on the table. "I have been guarding Yucheng for half a month without any casualties, and there are also." Luo Yiming still had half a day left, but he couldn't hold back the last two. "Get out of the station and listen." The lecturer looked at him coldly. Luo Yiming walked out with a big red face on his face. "This is called stealing a chicken but not eroding rice," Zheng Yuanxue whispered to Xue Jiaojiao. "Agree." Xue Jiaojiao nodded in a serious manner. At the end of a cultivation history, Luo Yiming, who was about to enter from outside the door, was stopped by the lecturer. "If you don't want to listen in class, then when others go to play, I'll teach you. Now take the book and follow me." Luo Yiming's face immediately wrinkled like a bitter gourd. The crowd watching the play couldn't help but chuckle. Why laugh? Luo Yiming held the book and walked through them, not forgetting to take a glance at Xue Jiaojiao before leaving. Xue Jiaojiao shrugged her shoulders, her expression somewhat helpless. Compared to what she had experienced before, Luo Yiming's approach was obviously too immature, which was just giving small reports to the lecturer. "I heard that He seems to be about to break through the process of refining qi. Isn't our progress too slow?" Zheng Yuanxue walked up to Xue Jiaojiao and whispered. Xue Jiaojiao let out a sigh. He knew that the girl sitting in the front row was usually quiet, but she seemed to be a very hard-working character. Every time the lecturer says something, she can quickly understand and apply it. "We also need to catch up as soon as possible." Xue Jiaojiao was only one step away from refining qi, and with a little effort, she was able to cross the first threshold of cultivation. Zheng Yuanxue, who was standing beside her, looked hesitant and said, "I don't know why, but I always feel that the spiritual power is a bit sluggish when running Zhou Tian." Xue Jiaojiao stopped and looked at her with a serious expression. "Is her spiritual power stagnant?" Zheng Yuanxue was startled by her expression and said with a smirk, "It's also possible that I felt wrong. Occasionally, the spiritual power within the Dantian works very slowly, and sometimes there is a feeling of being blocked." Listening to Zheng Yuanxue's description, Xue Jiaojiao's face became increasingly gloomy. She likes to browse through those books when she has free time. Now, Zheng Yuanxue's situation is very similar to the damage to Dantian recorded in ancient books. Dantian is the most important part of a cultivator, and even a slight damage can have an irreparable impact on the cultivator's future. So the spiritual medicines for repairing Dantian sold on the market have been sold at exorbitant prices. "Your father should also be a cultivator, right?" Xue Jiaojiao asked her. Zheng Yuanxue nodded. "Didn't he ever tell you about the damage to Dantian?" Zheng Yuanxue opened her eyes wide and apologetically replied, "My father is too busy to tell me these things." Xue Jiaojiao rubbed her forehead and said, "I hope I made a mistake. I'll take you to find Senior Sister Xie and ask them what they can do." Seeking collection, seeking tickets, seeking rating, end of this chapter. Chapter 9. Damaged Dantian. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Damaged Dantian. Watching Xue Jiaojiao's serious expression, Zheng Yuanxue's heart was also uneasy. Even though she didn't know what the damage to Dantian specifically represented, she could still guess that this matter was difficult to handle. As long as it is related to the Dantian, it is fundamentally linked to the cultivator. What would happen if Dantian was really damaged? Zheng Yuanxue held Xue Jiaojiao's hand tightly, her lips trembling slightly. Xue Jiaojiao didn't look back and said in a somewhat complicated tone, "It depends on the degree of damage to your Dantian. If it's only minor, you can try to repair it. If the damage is deep, not only will your lifelong cultivation be unable to progress, but it will also reduce your lifespan." Zheng Yuanxue lowered her head, her nose turning sour. "However, based on your description, it should only be slight," Xue Jiaojiao comforted her. Xue Jiaojiao led Zheng Yuanxue to the martial arts training ground, but there was no one there. She had to look for the residence of the chief disciple over there. Just as I passed by, I met Yunmengze, who was still dressed in sparkling gold and looked exceptionally dazzling in the sunlight. Hey! Why did you guys come? Yunmengze walked over. Xue Jiaojiao looked at him and hurriedly said, Senior brother Jin, my friend's Dantian is experiencing some stagnation when using spiritual power. It seems that the Dantian has been damaged. Can you help us find the elders of Dongsheng in our sect? Yunmengze immediately reacted and pointed in a direction, saying, You've come coincidentally. Today, Master Lin happened to change the dressing for Shenqinghe and Shenqingchuan, right over there. He took Xue Jiaojiao and Yunmengze to the door of the Shen brothers' room and knocked. Come in. The sound of deep forests came from inside. Yunmengze pushed open the door, and Shenqingchuan and Shenqinghe inside had already changed their medicine. This is the first time Xue Jiaojiao has seen the two brothers of the Shen family. They look exactly alike. What's wrong? Lin Luoshan saw Yunmengze bringing two inexperienced female cultivators over and asked with some confusion. Yunmengze pointed to Yunmengze and said, It seems that some of her Dantian has been damaged. Could you please show her, Master Lin? Yunmengze looked up at the deep forest with hope. The action of Lin Luoshan packing up stopped and he let out a soft hiss. Dantian is damaged. This is not easy to treat, Shenqinghe suddenly said. Shenqingchuan slapped him on the head and said, It's not as scary as he said. Uncle Lin must have a way. I'll check for you first. Lin Luoshan looked at Yunmengze. Sit down. Yunmengze led Shenqinghe out and closed the door. Xue Jiaojiao, who happened to return to Yunmengze, saw three people guarding the door together. He frowned and asked, What are you doing? Uncle Lin is treating his illness inside, Yunmengze replied. Sister Chu, didn't you go home to attend the funeral? Shenqinghe blinked his eyes. Xue Jiaojiao was still wearing plain white mourning clothes and rubbed her hair impatiently. Chu Qingfeng didn't want me to go and kicked me out. Fortunately, I returned to Yunmengze, he said upon hearing this. Shenqinghe immediately shut up, and Xue Jiaojiao only came to greet them before returning to his own room. Inside the room, Lin Luoshan is inspecting the Dantian for Yunmengze. A wave of spiritual energy searched all around her Dantian, and her eyebrows in the deep forest furrowed slightly. Xue Jiaojiao observed the deep expression of the forest and saw him frown, his heart beating rapidly. Lin Luoshan withdrew his hand and turned around, flipping his medicine box upside down. Yunmengze dared not ask for the result and could only watch the forest rummage through the medicine box with a worried heart. Don't worry, it's not an incurable disease. I'm the most powerful alchemist in Yunmengze. Lin Luo shook the prescription in his hand and smiled confidently. Yunmengze poked her head and looked at the several medicinal herbs written on it. Some of them were common and even she knew about them, but there was still a part she had never heard of. Xue Jiaojiao also looked curiously and suddenly widened her eyes. Isn't the familiar formula above the one that was revered by cultivators as a deity-like remedy for repairing Dantian due to its low price 100 years later? This is actually from the hands of Lin Luoshan. Xue Jiaojiao caught a glimpse of the signature at the end of the prescription. Changfeng. Lin Luoshan noticed her gaze and explained with a light cough, pen name, it's just a pen name. This recipe has not been passed on yet, but you can trust me. I have already tried it and it works. The name of the signature also matches. Xue Jiaojiao is now truly certain that the owner of this prescription in 100 years will be Lin Luoshan. Elder Lin, can it really be cured? Yunmengze looked at him. Lin Luo nodded deeply and said, This is just a slight damage to your elixir field. According to my prescription, a course of treatment every 3 months, and with only 3 treatments, you can recover to your original state. It only takes about half a year, but during this period, your cultivation may not be able to improve. Yunmengze smiled with relief and said, I still have a clear understanding of the present and future. Lin Luoshan looked at her seriously and said, "Very well, you are the second person to use this prescription, and I will not betray your trust." Zheng Yuanxue felt a thump in her heart and tentatively asked, "Elder Lin, who was the first person to use this prescription?" Lin Luo patted his chest deeply and looked up, saying, "Of course it's me." He spent over 50 years researching this prescription, then destroyed his own elixir field and tested it on himself. When Tao Yanji found out about this, he was scolded for several days. During that time, whenever Tao Yanji saw him, he kept nagging until he confirmed that his prescription was really effective, and Tao Yanji didn't say anything. Xue Jiaojiao and Zheng Yuanxue exchanged a glance. Zheng Yuanxue was clearly a bit uneasy, but Xue Jiaojiao knew that this prescription really had an effect. "Try listening to Elder Lin's advice, it will be useful," Xue Jiaojiao patted her shoulder. "Believe in Elder Lin, he is the most powerful alchemist in Yunmengze." Zheng Yuanxue secretly breathed a sigh of relief into her heart and nodded. "Then it's up to Elder Lin." The name of Lin Luoshan was mentioned by Zheng Yuanxue's father. "My father said that he is a crazy person in Yunmengze who is obsessed with alchemy. In order to research what he wants, he can do anything." Although this description may seem intimidating, it indirectly confirms the strength of the deep forest. Due to the damage to Dantian, Zheng Yuanxue's course can only be temporarily put on hold, and everything will have to wait for her to adjust before proceeding. Xue Jiaojiao also worked hard in the following days, entering the threshold of gas refining and successfully reaching the first level of gas refining. And Luo Yiming, hearing when she had advanced, hurriedly came to her door. "I will always be stronger than you." Luo Yiming stood at her doorstep, his eyes stubborn and firm. Xue Jiaojiao was unable to cope with him and nodded vaguely. Chu Qingxi squatted in the corner and looked at it with a burst of laughter, while Luo Yiming restrained a bit, but appeared somewhat childish. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. First Small Task. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. First Small Task. As new disciples step into the first level of qi refining one by one, their individual small tasks will soon be distributed. This is the first time Xue Jiaojiao has known about such regulations. However, during this period, she felt that her cultivation speed seemed to be faster than in her previous life. This was not her illusion, but something seemed to have changed in the dark. She is not sure if this is a variable of her own rebirth, but at least for now, it is very beneficial for her. Yu Qing walked in from the door and brought their first task to enter the first level of qi refining. First of all, congratulations on officially entering the first threshold of the cultivation world. Your future path to immortality depends on how much extra effort you can exert. Secondly, according to the rules of Yunmengze, any cultivator who enters the first level of qi refining must go to the misty forest and kill a carp-eating beast. This is your first assessment in Yunmengze, and I hope you can complete it well in the misty forest. Qin Shu took them inside, and everyone immediately thought of the scene where Qi Shao killed those carp-eating beasts. Some people start to retreat in their hearts, unsure if they can complete this task well. After all, although the carp-eating beast is the lowest level monster, it is not an easy thing to deal with for some of them. However, using carp-eating animals as assessment is undoubtedly the safest option. Although they have great strength, they appear slightly bulky due to their size, and the trees in the misty forest provide great help to the cultivators. Xue Jiaojiao didn't expect that the first task would be this. It didn't sound too difficult to complete because they weren't people who hadn't stepped into qi refining a few days ago. It seems that Yunmeng still pays more attention to practical combat. You don't have to worry, the senior brothers and sisters in the sect will protect you, at least they won't die in the misty forest. Yu Qing smiled slightly. This kind of comfort makes people who already have little confidence in completing tasks well suddenly feel half-hearted. Yu Qing explained the time for them to carry out the task, starting from the next week and continuing until the last day of next week. As long as the task is completed within that time period, it will be considered as passed. Zheng Yuanxue was unable to participate in this, and Yu Qing was also aware of her situation, so she crossed her name off the list. Cheer up, Zheng Yuanxue cheered Xue Jiaojiao. I will. They walked out of the fish dragon palace, only to see a man standing at the pillar, with eyebrows and eyes somewhat similar to Zheng Yuanxue. Xue Jiaojiao could probably guess that it was Zheng Yuanxue's father. This was the first time Xue Jiaojiao saw her father visit her after Zheng Yuanxue confirmed the damage to Dantian for a week. Zheng Lin walked over and glanced at Xue Jiaojiao next to Zheng Yuanxue. Xue Jiaojiao quickly said, "Then I'll go back first." Zheng Yuanxue hummed and followed in Zheng Lin's footsteps. What's going on? Zheng Lin, who was walking ahead, suddenly spoke up. Zheng Yuanxue looked up and ran to catch up. Elder Lin said I was damaged in Dantian. Fortunately, I discovered it early, it was only minor, and there was still some treatment available. Zheng Lin stopped and turned to look at her, saying, I heard you got very close to the descendant of a fairy killer. Is that the person you just met? Father, she's not that kind of person. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have discovered my elixir at all. Shut up. Zheng Lin blushed with anger and pointed at her nose, cursing, do you want to end up with your mother? People who believe in immortal killers have said this throughout history, but has one ever achieved a good ending? Father, she is really different from those immortal killers. She is innocent. Zheng Yuanxue argued with him. She had been spending time with Xue Jiaojiao day and night, not knowing much about her, but she could also see a rough idea. They have the filthy bloodline and curse of a fairy killer flowing through their bodies, and one day they will go crazy and become a monster that only knows how to kill. You will eventually die like your mother. Zheng Yuanxue gasped for breath, tears streaming down her eyes. She's my friend. She also discovered that my Dantian was damaged. As soon as you came, you taught me and didn't care about my health. Am I still your biological daughter? Why have you become so aggressive since my mother passed away? Zheng Lin suddenly approached and said, it's because you're my daughter that I'm going to wake you up. Immortal killers don't have a good thing, including their descendants. Zheng Yuanxue looked at Zheng Lin's bloodshot eyes, her palms slightly sweating, and whispered, even if you kill me today, I won't do what you want. I have my own judgment on what friends I make, and I don't need anyone else to say. In your eyes, am I someone else? Zheng Lin smiled back without getting angry and took a few steps back. Okay, I hope you don't have any regrets that day. After finishing speaking, Zheng Lin angrily shook her sleeves and left, while Zheng Yuanxue squatted on the ground, sobbing silently. Xue Jiaojiao, standing in the corner, withdrew her gaze with a somewhat complicated expression. Zheng Yuanxue's father, who was angry about losing his wife, could understand his malice towards the immortal killer. In this argument, Zheng Yuanxue was probably the most injured. Xue Jiaojiao silently left, and at this moment, Zheng Yuanxue's mood should be more complicated when she saw her. Xue Jiaojiao's mother is the lowest performing dancer in Qinghe. If she didn't know that kind of dance, she would probably receive more patrons every day. Before her mother passed away, Xue Jiaojiao also heard her mother say that when she received her father, she did not know the identity of the person who killed immortals, because her mother was just an ordinary mortal. He often frequented his mother's place until one day a girl in the flower house discovered him killing and chopping corpses. Her father, who had never met before, killed everyone in the flower house in a fit of anger, while her mother hid in the haystack of the woodshed, listening to the mournful cries emanating from the other side of the flower house. It wasn't until her father arrived at the firewood shed that the nearby cultivators hurriedly arrived, but they only drove away her father and couldn't kill him. The lucky mother lost her livelihood and found herself pregnant a few months later. But at that time, she was so poor that she couldn't afford to see any illness. Despite trying external forces, she couldn't get rid of Xue Jiaojiao in her belly. As her belly gradually bulged, the mother had to slowly put down her grudges and take on some cleaning and sewing work to welcome the child. The birth of Xue Jiaojiao was beyond everyone's expectations, not to mention that her mother had once crazily wanted to kill her. Her attitude towards Xue Jiaojiao is neither good nor bad. But during the years when my mother passed away in the world, it seemed that her attitude towards Xue Jiaojiao had also improved, and she even gave her a name. Xue Jiaojiao never understood this surname because her mother had been using the flower name Yunrong from the flower tower at that time. She also asked her mother, is it because her father's surname is Xue? My mother's eyes flickered over resentment and shook her head. No, it's not. Xue Jiaojiao asked again, was it her mother's former surname? My mother remained silent. No matter how Xue Jiaojiao asked, she couldn't get an answer. How active is Baozi reading this book? End of this chapter.